Welcome back. I'm Brandon, the HBAR Bull, once again joined by Zepsi. We both do some contract work for the HBAR Foundation, but we don't do these weekly updates in any official capacity. We're just coming to you personally to give you the latest in the Hedera ecosystem. Welcome, Zep.
How's it going, Brandon?
It's going really good. We're having some technical issues here, but we have so much really good stuff to get into this week, so I want to get to it. But as always, none of this is financial advice. Use it for entertainment or educational purposes only. So the first thing I want to get into is there was a lot of headlines around Visa this week. And though there was another network that was highlighted in a lot of these headlines, I think there's a lot to be excited about for Hedera community as well. So the first thing, of course, is the fact that Visa is focusing on entering the DLT space or leveraging DLT and crypto. And their head of crypto or head of blockchain at Visa, Kai Sheffield, authored a blog called Blockchains are Entering the Broadband Era. And that's said another way, it's entering the hockey stick moment, and they're going to continue to leverage it. What he says in this blog is, going forward, we imagine a future where Visa's network of networks involves more than just multiple currencies and bank settlement rails, but also multiple blockchain networks, stablecoins, and CBDCs or tokenized deposits. So they're certainly going all in, but there were other headlines that certainly caught my eye and should make Hederians excited. So Visa expands stablecoin pilot programs with WorldPay and Nuvi. So what they say in this is the purpose of these pilot programs is to test the movement of millions of USDC between Visa's partners over the Solana and Ethereum blockchain networks. So first off, when I see the millions of USDC, of course, Hedera does not have a huge pool of USDC yet. So that may be one of the reasons why they've chosen to go with Solana and Ethereum, the biggest pools of USDC at this point. But I do like what I see in this title saying WorldPay. So WorldPay, of course, is one of the Hedera governing council members. And there was actually somebody that is associated with Hedera and WorldPay that put out a tweet. I'm not going to put it up because he did remove that post, so I want to respect that. But suffice it to say that there is some exciting things, I think, coming forward with Visa and Hedera. So Zeb, just to get your thoughts on this, what do you think what we're seeing come out around Visa?
Yeah, I think at face value, of course, it's frustrating for another network to be announced first. But, that's just the nature of these things. But the standout here, of course, is that it's a multi-chain offering, or they're going to be looking at various different blockchains to facilitate, the new payment rails that they're sort of looking into. And that's no different than MasterCard. You look at MasterCard, they've got the MasterCard token network. It's, again, a multi-chain product offering because we're in this early days, because there's a lot of different L1s. And, not all of them have been proven. Some of them have been more proven than others, like Hedera, given the massive throughput we're seeing. But, of course, they want to keep their options open. They don't want to just sort of go all in one thing and then for something to happen down the line in what is a very nascent industry. So they're keeping their pool open. Maybe as time goes on, they'll continue testing. They'll pull ones out that they don't think are robust enough. And then the cream will rise to the top, and hopefully Hedera could be one of those. But of course, we'll see how it develops.
Oh, I think it's going to go well. Just like what we saw with FedNow, they came out and talked about FedNow launching, in the spring, and then actually launched a few months later. And a lot of other networks pumped on that news. But then we see a few months later, Drop comes out, and of course, they're completely built on top of Hedera, and it's being featured on FedNow. I think we're going to see this develop going forward. It's just good that there's companies like MasterCard, like Visa, like WorldPay that are so focused on the DLT space, and I think Hedera, like you said, is going to rise to the top. All right, the next thing that I want to cover, we covered Carbonbase just last week, and they got covered by Coindesk this week. Max Song, the CEO of Carbonbase, explained why he landed on Hedera and why he chose Hedera. So listen in real quick.
What blockchain are you using? Is it a proof of work or proof of stake blockchain they're using for this?
We are using Hedera, and we're very excited to be partnering closely with Hedera, partly because they have an incredible enterprise ecosystem, right? They have almost 30 Fortune 500 sized companies actively participating and running the nodes that hold up the Hedera blockchain. And we've actually had a chance to meet some of the council members. We spoke together on Davos stages earlier this year. And we believe that this is kind of the alignment of interest from the corporate sustainability concern of a Fortune 500 company and also their innovation arm trying to find, meaningful use case for this new Web3 infrastructure.
Max is clearly a great ambassador for Hedera, and it's great that he's come over to Hedera and has this platform with Coindesk. But I also like to see the coverage we're getting from Coindesk. We had Drop recently with Sushil. Now we've got Carbonbase, and it seems that Coindesk, I know, have been restaffing. They've been shifting what they're doing. They're going more towards, I think, real-world use cases, covering real-world use cases. And so I'm liking the fact that Hedera is getting more in this conversation, that they're discussing Hedera more. I would like to think that they'll end up respecting Hedera more and covering Hedera more in the process. So I think, yeah, we're in more of a maturing market. We're definitely not there yet, but I'm glad to see sort of the mainstream Web3 media picking up more of our ecosystem in the hopes that I'll only continue.
It seems like that's the direction we're going. So we are going to make a little bit of a shift here. We've been talking about some serious subjects. I want to get into something a little bit more fun. We all have like our favorite things that are being built on the Hedera network. I know one of the things that you're a huge fan of is Legends of the Past. I caught up with Basil. He is the CEO of Legends of the Past. But before we get to the clip with them, I wanted to hear why you're such a big fan of Legends of the Past and what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, Basil has been building the ecosystem for over a year and a half now. And I'm excited for multiple reasons. I think as one of the first French teams on Hedera, France is a very Web3 heavy country, especially in gaming. They've got the likes of Ubisoft from there. And I think we need that kind of foothold within the French community so that when we're at events like NFT Paris or Paris Blockchain Week, whatever it is, we want to have more exposure there. So I think getting our first foothold in the French community, which is quite closed, I think that is great. But alongside that, they're great builders. They've got a great team behind them. They've got ex-Supercell, which did Clash of Clans, ex-Ubisoft, of course, we all know, ex-Tap for Fun, which are a leader in mobile gaming. I think they've got the caliber of team and the focus on mobile gaming, which is one of the fastest growing gaming ecosystems, one of which we haven't seen much of on Hedera yet. And so I think these three things, i.e., France, solid team, and the fact it's a mobile game for Web3, I think three core contributors to what could be a successful application on Hedera, and I've got complete faith in Basil as the founder and CEO, though.
All right, well, let's hear what the latest coming out of Legends of the Past is. Basil, welcome back.
Hi, glad to be back.
Yeah, absolutely. We'd love to have you back. But before we get into it, do you mind if we show the latest trailer that you put out?
No, absolutely, please.
All right, let's check it out.
Let's do it.
Basil, it looks absolutely incredible. So what's the purpose of putting out this trailer now?
Well, thank you so much. Well, if you take a look at the end of the video, you can see an Egyptian icon. And that's a hint because recently our Egyptian Muay Thai queen, Clio, has made her grand entrance in Legend of the Past. And there is more to it. She has also been granted the right to form her Clio committee, a large assembly of 1,000 members. And these esteemed members will wield significant power and responsibility within Legend of the Past. So eventually, whether you are a gamer coming from Hedera, coming from another chain, or simply someone who likes our gameplay, everybody will want to be part of this Legend committee. And in other words, on the 27th of September will be the first Legend NFT sale, our Clio NFT sale. In other words, the birth of Clio Committee.
So, I hope I make the cut and I actually can make it onto the Clio committee. But can you explain the utility of the Clio NFT?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of our competitive advantage as a Web3 game is that the sustainability of our tokenomics is ensured by exclusively rewarding with our LOP token the Legend committees, a fixed supply of NFT investors during our tournaments. In other words, if you manage to get your hand on a Clio NFT, you'll become de facto a member of Clio committee. And if you're a member of Clio committee, you'll have some duties, but also some privileges. As duties, you'll have to elect some Clio representative for the tournaments. You'll also have to handle and decide how to manage the Clio vault, which houses its NFTs and LOP token. And last, you'll also earn passively some LOP token based on the performances of your Clio representative.
I got you. So it really seems like your strategy will ensure a game with some real staying power. How can HBAR mint the Clio NFT on September 27th, right?
Exactly, yeah. So basically, there are two routes to become a member of Clio committee. The first one is if you are one of our jar bearer, if you own and hold an infinity jar, your NFT will come into life and will burst a heaven key. And this heaven key is a guaranteed mint coming with also celestial benefits. But if you're new to our project, it's absolutely fine. We are welcoming mortals. People can enter LOP right now. You'll simply have to enter our Discord as well. And in our Discord, you have a series of quests to fulfill, and progressively you'll earn a coveted mortal whitelist spots. But you can also be very lucky because once a week, we'll spin a wheel, and that wheel will randomly provide some heaven keys that again come with those celestial benefits for the Clio Mint. And if you're extremely lucky, you can maybe one of the few selected to receive directly a Clio NFT and unlocking ultimately one of the first seats of Clio committee.
I love how you guys are keeping the community engaged with these little quests and everything else. But I know that game development is a long process. When will people actually be able to interact with some of this actual gameplay of Legends of the Past?
Well, we recently made significant progress, and we are thrilled because we've built multiple arenas. Here we can show you a 1v1 Legend arena. We also built some 3v3 arenas for cooperative mode. And recently we've integrated and implemented the multiplayer. So people can now, as of today, play, online. We don't want to give out to say, and commit to a date for the beta today, because we still have, some adjustment and, time process, time planning to implement, but we've made significant progress. And so I would conclude like this, saying that I believe that today is one of the best day and maybe the last day to get in early, because the first legend committees are about to be formed. There will be the announcement of new legends. We have new trailers coming along the way. And so as of today, it's one of the best ways to enter and to be in early.
Great to hear. So thanks for stopping by, Basil, and we're looking forward to further updates. So please come back.
Absolutely, will do. And thank you for everything you've been doing for the community, Brandon. That's awesome.
My pleasure. All right, Zep, we're going to have a hard left turn here. We're going to get into a region that is getting an awful lot of attention, and that is your country over there in the UK. Can you tell us about what we saw with the Hedera Governing Council going to the House of Lords?
We've seen a lot going on actually recently with the UK, and it seems like policy, because, Nilmini Reuben, who's the head of policy at Hedera, she seems to be making herself around the UK, meeting a lot of high up figures in government. This week we saw the House of Lords. A few weeks ago, we saw policy think tanks, including Chatworth House, I believe it was, and the Commonwealth Sec. So she's really been making what seems like headway within the UK. And given the caliber of people she's meeting, I think that's to do with policy work and showing the benefits of DLT to a country led by Rishi Sunak, who is very pro Web3 and wants to make a UK a home or a hub for that. This week, we saw Nilmini. She was with various governing council members, and she was at the House of Lords, one of the main chambers of our democracy in the UK. So she was with the Right Honourable Lord Nat Y, and they were talking about different types of blockchain technology, of course, Hedera, tokenization, and how they can solve, real-world social challenges. So I'm sure we'll learn more about that in the future. But again, great to see Nilmini out there as a force for the Hedera network.
And speaking of everything that's going on over in the UK, you guys had a great meetup last night. Can you tell us about what you saw there?
Definitely. First of all, hats off to Duncan, who's the senior investment manager at Aberdeen and who hosted the event in the Aberdeen offices. It was great to see, I think, so many active governing council members. There was ServiceNow, DA Piper, Aberdeen, IBM, and more, all in attendance alongside the community. We were shoulder to shoulder in discussion, talking to each other, watching the same things as each other, and all there in the same place with the same excitement for what is the Hedera network. So shout out, I think it was HBAR that I met, HBAR, Brendan Vade, Romeo, and JB and his dad from Devon. So a real good collective of people there. And actually, even alongside that, alongside the Governing Council, alongside senior Hedera figures, alongside the community, there were figures from Swift, KPMG, and other sort of figures from leading institutions. So a lot of high-profile people there. One of the highlights for me, I think, was seeing Aberdeen, seeing DLA Piper talking about real-world asset tokenization and seeing their genuine excitement for it and their genuine commitment to Hedera for this opportunity. It's worth reiterating, especially for DLA Piper with Toko, the dual benefits of real-world asset tokenization. We're seeing it more as a narrative now. We saw, of course, Avalanche with their RWA program. We know we've been doing it for a long time with Token and others. But you need to, I think, understand the twofold value, both for the people tokenizing their assets and the people investing in them. And so one of the key value propositions is for the actual property owners and the portfolio managers themselves. Typically, these portfolios, especially in real estate, are very, very low liquidity. I.e., selling a house in the UK, I think, as of 2023, takes on average about 250 days, which is an insane amount of time. If you need to liquidate and you need the money ASAP, all that's going to make you do is lowball yourself. Perhaps for a buyer, that's good, but for someone who's amassed their own portfolio, it's really not something you want to see happen. And so by fractionalizing these assets and selling them as tokenized securities, fractionalizing the property rights for a property, the owners can buy up or sell off tokens at whenever they want. They don't have to sell the entire property. They can sell 1/40th of it on what will be a 24-hour market with much higher liquidity. So the first value proposition there is for the seller. The seller has access to high liquidity markets and probably actually at a premium given the history of these markets, but also the buyers themselves, the smaller investors. Everything that crypto sort of represents or was traditionally invested is about democratizing finance, bringing the smaller players in. Of course, we haven't seen that very often. We've seen extortionate gas fees on networks like Ethereum actually preventing entire continents from participating in things like DeFi. But on a highly efficient ledger like Hedera, with something like real-world asset tokenization, with something like fractionalized assets, it really is a position for smaller investors who, say, can't dish out $400,000 or pounds on a house, but can put 10K into 1/40th of that or whatever it might be. Not only, again, is it the property owner themselves that's benefiting here, but also everyday retail investor. And I think that's very important to understand, because if that value was just in favor of one or the other, I don't think there'd be much traction. But clearly, there's a value proposition for both the owner and the buyers, and therefore, I really think, and DLA Piper reiterated last night, that this is a market that can take off because of that. We're at the very early days. Regulation isn't quite there, but we've got DLA Piper, a global law firm, sort of spearheading that for us with a platform like Toko. Reiterating the value of that was one of the greatest things I saw, and I'm very excited for DLA Piper, and they've actually got, they announced they've got some news coming up in Dubai, which, as we know, is a much more regulatory friendly place at the moment. So exciting things to come. Very, very active council member, and of course, we're only going to see more of them in the future.
Yeah, well, that's an example of traditional finance, the traditional world using DLT. But we also have some really good news coming out around DeFi, and this is on the regulatory front. So I caught up with George. There was a really big ruling that came out on Uniswap, and that's going to have a lot of implications, as I said, on the DeFi ecosystem and on the Hedera space as a whole. So let's get some of George's insights, because it's really interesting stuff. So, George, another seemingly positive court ruling for the crypto industry, but this one was not brought by the SEC, but an investor, and that case later became a class action lawsuit. Can you tell us about the Uniswap case and how it concluded just last week?
Yeah, so the Uniswap case was an interesting one where it's a proposed class action. So it's a private case where you have plaintiffs that are suing Uniswap, as well as some of the VCs behind Uniswap and liquidity providers in Uniswap contracts or pools. They're being sued saying, look, we invested in some rug pulls essentially, and you facilitated those rug pulls, therefore you're liable for that action. the thing is, this decision is huge for the DeFi space because it was the first time that this kind of theory connection just to the code theory or developer theory was being tested in court. And another Southern District judge came out, essentially the plaintiff dismissed the entire complaint, but there were some really good nuggets in there for the industry, right? So initially the court says, you're trying to extend the reach of the securities laws to an area that they don't reach right now, which was really good. I didn't think initially that we would get such statements because the SEC was not a party to this suit. The court says, for example, as explained below, the court declines to stretch the federal securities laws to cover the conduct alleged and concludes that plaintiffs' concerns are better addressed to Congress than to this court. Sounds like the major questions doctrine to me, right? And the court understands because at the end of the day, these plaintiffs were harmed by a rug pull, which is not a good situation to be in. And it's frustrating to have no recourse in this situation, as the court acknowledged, because like the court says, whether this anonymity is troublesome enough to merit regulation is not for the court to decide, but for Congress. Again, the anonymity that's provided by a DEX for token issuers could be viewed both ways as positive and negative. Here for the plaintiffs, it's definitely a negative because they were scammed and now they can't find the plaintiffs to name them in the lawsuit. And this court says, well, look, the fact that you don't know who the plaintiffs are or who issued the token is not reason enough for me then to extend the liability to the developers of the code and to participants in pools. That's just not where the law is. And if you want that to be the law, that's a question for Congress.
So, George, we've talked about how important the Southern District of New York is to the entire, financial industry. So what kind of precedent does this set for the decentralized finance space? And of course, that includes the growing Hedera DeFi ecosystem.
So again, it's because it's just one district court judge, there's not very much precedential value. However, it does bode well for the industry and developers that it ruled in favor and here in this case and prevented regulations from becoming overbroadened. And in fact, I think this court went out of its way to narrow the areas in which a developer, for example, it can't be liable for the code that it develops. There was a case, I think 2019 case, that the CFTC was seeking to bring against the developer of the code, the algorithm that led to the flash crash. And there, essentially, the argument was, look, if it was reasonably foreseeable that the code that you're developing will lead to a violation of our regulations, then you are aiding and abetting and therefore liable. That case first was tried by the DOJ twice, hung jury twice, DOJ went away, CFTC brought the case, settlement. So we didn't know until now, it hasn't been tested again. So up until this case, what we expected to be kind of the standard was reasonably foreseeable. This court, again, it says, while no court has yet to decide this issue in the context of a decentralized protocol smart contract, the court finds that the smart contracts here were themselves able to be carried out lawfully, as with the exchange of crypto commodities, ETH and Bitcoin. I'll leave aside the fact that this court came out and said that ETH is a commodity, so that's great. But what the court here is saying, look, if this program that was developed can be used for a legitimate purpose, then that's it. That's where the analysis stops, which is great, right? As opposed to the the reasonably foreseeable. Because I'd say, like, look, we create a DEX, it's reasonably foreseeable that somebody will launch a scam token, a rug pull on it, right? But they're saying, no, if it can be used for legitimate purposes like Bitcoin ETH trading, you're fine. So we're not going to extend it. So I think that's great in that it limited the liability, and hopefully it gives developers a sigh of relief, right? That they're not all going to go to jail if somebody uses some open source code they developed to violate some rule or some regulation or some law.
It seems like very positive developments. George, do you have any other thoughts before we let you go?
Yeah, I did want to quote the court again because, again, so this is the same judge that is overseeing the SEC versus Coinbase case. So that's why people are really parsing through this to see if there's any indication of how she'll rule on that. What I did like about the ruling is that the judge seemed to be in the know. She really understood the technology, delved into it, and took a hard line approach as to where the law is now and the appropriate party to change the law, which is Congress, not the court, and this is my speculation, I think this judge would also say it's also not the SEC's position to do so. And one more quote that I just giggled to myself at because it's a dig at Gensler. She says, plaintiff citations to SEC Chair Gensler's conclusory statement. So let me just take a step back. Gensler made this argument against DeFi in particular, saying, look, you guys say it's DeFi and decentralized, but to the extent that there's a core group of developers or somebody collecting some fees from this decentralized application, that's who's liable. So the court is calling that statement here conclusory, and I thought that was great, right? It's like Gensler is not the end all be all, and he doesn't get to dictate exactly what the regulations are.
So, George, it seems like every week we have you back because there's been some kind of further development in the space. I always expect to see you in a couple months when something else big happens, but there's so many things happening in this space that it seems like we have to get your expertise on a regular basis. So we really appreciate you coming back on such a regular basis and giving us the inside track.
It's a pleasure coming back, especially when to discuss some good news. So having me back as often as possible.
All right, so unfortunately, we've lost Rufus. We had some technical issues, but I'm going to push through, and hopefully we'll be able to get this out today. All right, so it was really good to see what George had to say there. It seems like we're getting rapid-fire good news over and over and over again on the judicial front. Hopefully that's going to impact legislation, that's going to impact regulation going forward, and it seems like George is more than willing to come on and explain it all to us. All right, so the next thing we have coming up is Shark Bites. I had some really good questions. We had a bunch of questions, so we did this in fairly rapid fire, but the responses from Rob were perfect. So listen in to what Rob had to say. Welcome back, Rob.
Hey, Brandon. How you doing?
I'm doing very well. Now, we have a lot of questions today, so it's going to be pretty rapid fire. You up for it?
I'm up for the rapid fire Shark Bites. Let's do it.
All right, so the first one comes from Jason Hills. He asks, in your opinion, 5 or even 10 years down the line, which sphere of use cases do you personally think will be the biggest by way of total volume of transactions on the Hedera network, as well as for DLT uses in general? Is it ESG, tokenization of a certain category of asset? So, Rob, where do you think we're going to get most of our transactions from?
Wow, I mean, that's a great question. 5 to 10 years is it's kind of scenario planning territory. You know, this is moving so quickly. I'd like to give 2 answers to that because I think, firstly, what we're seeing is this kind of rapid adoption phase now, where businesses, organizations are understanding the potential of Web3 more and how Hedera can be applied to it. So, use of the Hedera consensus service and tokenization service and the smart contract service are all now being utilized in ways that maybe a year or 2 ago hadn't been envisaged. So I anticipate that continuing. Remember, transactions per second isn't the only metric for a success metric for the network, and it's useful to have. But tokenization and value represented on the network is equally important, if not more so, because some of those network services are get more revenue than just high TPS using HCS. That said, all of the above, I think. So tokenization, ESG, I think what we'll see is those 3 big strategic pillars that we're looking at now, developing and evolving. And those 3, to remind everyone, are sustainability, consumer engagement, and on-chain finance. So those 3, I'm already seeing overlaps. So we're seeing the use of payments and rewards, for example, overlapping, or things like Galaxy merging all of these things together in new consumer experiences. Sustainability, I suspect, will grow, as we keep saying. This multi-trillion-dollar market will drive a lot of activity in that space, but then we'll see crossovers to those other 2 streams as well. So that's the first answer, these kind of increasingly rapid evolution of these big thematic areas that Hedera is ideally suited for. The second answer is actually a bit further out. So I think there's a 4th pillar, and it's a pillar that's emerging now, which we're not focusing on, but I'm seeing from an enterprise perspective being picked up. And this is Industry 4.0. Industry 4.0 is a kind of catch-all for things like IoT, drones, robotics, supply chain automation, all of these things, again, which I believe Hedera is ideally suited for. And in a 5-year time frame, that's where I think we're going to go. It's really going to start ramping up once the foundational layers, the foundational understandings for what Hedera applied to Web3 is, then changes up yet another gear. And that's when we start talking about, or we're already talking about, smart cities and smart precincts and the foundational infrastructure that's required for such things. And that's probably a whole different area of questions. So I'll stop there.
Well covered, Rob. So next up, we have Sivo, who asked, is Hedera approaching any big oil, coal, natural gas, petroleum, or steel markets for offset accountability? If not, do they plan to?
Yes. Short answer. I won't say anything more, but absolutely, in the sustainability space, in the enterprise space, there are obvious applications in the oil and gas and all of those industries in that sector. So yes, watch this space.
All right. So the next one comes from our own Zepsi. He says, how can we compete with platforms like Polygon in India? Now, he has been talking a fair amount about the blockchain Yatra, so I'm not exactly sure what he's looking for, but have at that one.
I think Zepsi's kind of serving me an easy one here. Yeah, so Polygon has a really strong heartland in India. I think all of the team are Indian, and they're, as a layer 2 for Ethereum, they've made great strides. We don't necessarily want to compete with the other chains. We don't compete because we focus on Hedera and believe, the true believers amongst us believe that actually the quality will come through, the positive beneficial properties of the Hashgraph and the network and ecosystem that has been growing and accelerating over the last few years means that quality will necessarily come to us. And we're seeing that already. So we're seeing many kind of gaming studios and supply chain businesses that had firstly started with Ethereum and then realized that they were too constrained and then looked for a layer 2 because it was a natural move for them. But then layer 2s actually, by definition, trade-offs. They're trade-offs on the trilemma. So there are a wide range of use cases which that is not suitable for. In fact, probably all of them. So we are then, through having our own EVM, having our own smart contract service, which is superior to all of the others in terms of performance and cost. We'll get those Solidity developers who have been applying their trade on Polygon moving over. Now, that was a Polygon answer. An India answer is we've got the BBY, the Bharat Blockchain Yatra, the tour that Zepsi has been covering, which the Hashgraph Association has sponsored across so many of those states with big hackathons and big events and big prize money. We've had 4 events so far, I think. We've got a big hackathon, the first of the big hackathons coming up. We're touching 50,000 developers as a first step with our partners IDS in India. And, we'll see, won't we? India is just such a massive continent with a massive population and a massive kind of IT focus. It only makes sense that Hedera will spark interest. And of course, we've got Indian-based governing council members who are supportive and actually actively involved in summits in terms of IIT Madras and Wipro and Tata Communications. So, we shouldn't ever discount India. They are the world's most populous nation, and they have been focused around the IT industry for decades now. We are absolutely going to be utilizing that huge heartland of great development resource to be applied to the Hedera ecosystem. And this isn't the start, of course. The foundation have had Lumos Labs. We've run hackathons there before. We had some of the best responses to any of our hackathons or any of our accelerators from India. The BBY isn't starting from a standing start. It's we're already there, and time will tell how rapidly we are adopted there. But I think it will be fairly quickly.
Well, I'm certainly expecting some fireworks. All right, Coinman, the original HBAR variant, is up next. He asks, is Sharky aware of anyone who has approached Hedera and subsequently said, you're not yet ready for the size use case we want to build on DLT? If yes, who?
Thanks, Coinman. I am not aware of any use case where a counterparty has come and said, no, you're not ready. Clearly, we have a roadmap for Hedera, which recognizes that over time we are going to have to evolve, and the whole of the kind of governance and change management process and tech committee are in place in order to support that change. So I personally think we're not ready for some of the massive scale use cases. There are applications of, let's say, IoT networks at huge scale that I think we would struggle to scale to at the moment, potentially without sharding or potentially without a kind of private permission version of Hedera that can be plugged into the public one. We've already got that. We can already do that, but it's not really been tested at scale. So referencing my previous answer, I think in a kind of 4 to 5 year time frame, once we've got community nodes in place, once we've got the decentralization rolling out, once we've got state proofs in place so that we can shard, or we can create entirely different Hedera-based networks for special purposes. I think that's when we really start ramping up, and the Industry 4.0 use cases can be utilized. But we don't really know what we don't know at the moment. We're kind of moving forward. But to answer Coinman, I'm not aware of anyone turning away and saying, no, you're not fit for purpose. There are other reasons that they choose other chains, but never for that reason.
Yeah, I think that it is a good problem for Hedera to have, because those problems are going to be solved, and then we'll just be able to be ready for those large volume use cases. The next question comes from Eric DM101. He said, I live in the Netherlands near ASML, the world's leading supplier for the semiconductor industry. Their extensive supply chain alone makes them very suitable for a Hedera application, and even a possible candidate for a governing council member spot. What can I do to put them in touch with Hedera?
Just contact me. I mean, it's quite simple. They're an enterprise that has a perfect use case for Hedera. Just put them in touch with me. I mean, we're seeing a lot of supply chain. Obviously, we have Atma.io. We have Avery Dennison driving, massive scale at the moment. We've got lots and lots of headroom. I'm looking forward to seeing some more of these big supply chain use cases. I actually, in a previous life, I worked at Intel in California on supply chain for chips. So that's an industry I've cut my teeth in and know very well. And we're seeing a lot of supply chain, both on the agricultural side, on the materials side, hazardous waste. We're seeing the Avery Dennison Atma use case as well. So yes, definitely put them in touch with me. I'll be delighted to onboard them into the Hashgraph Enterprise program.
And there have been community members within the Hedera ecosystem that have been responsible for actually starting that conversation
100%.
And getting
people. Yeah, absolutely. That's why we've got such a strong ecosystem, because many of our both ventures, small businesses and enterprises are originated out of the community. And we're very, very engaged across all of the different organizations with community. And by all means, there's my comms are open.
All right, so we actually have another one from Eric. He went on to ask, Rob earlier said it's all about real-world utility and network usage. In recent weeks, we've been spoiled with announcements of upcoming new, larger network uses. However, the TPS is actually still carried by Atma.io. When does Rob expect this new change? So when do you expect diversification of some of these very large network users?
It's happening right now. Okay, so yes, Atma. I wouldn't say Atma is carrying the network. Atma is actually demonstrating mass use of the Hedera consensus service. But as we've said many times, the token service, the smart contract service, they're actually increasing as well. And network revenue is related, to some of those services that are not HCS in terms of disproportionate benefit to the network. So I anticipate this scaling up. I'm hesitating to use the word step change, but let's say a linear scaling up over time as we add more and more. So with each use case, high scale use case like that, it validates the technical choices of the other projects that are looking at Hedera. So, the scaling, I think, will accelerate, and it will accelerate over reasonably short time. I would say 2 to 3 years. We're going to be pushing it. Now there are potentially we've got the throttle, we've got the untested nature of the wider network. We've got community nodes coming at some point. So all of this will need to be piloted and tested as we go. But I suspect within 2 to 3 years, we've got the potential for another 4, 5, 10 Atmas. It's not beyond the imagination to think that, or suspect, as I do, having seen the pipeline, that there will be many more like that. And it's not just supply chain, of course. The Atma experience has shown that just for a few product lines, you can scale. There are thousands of product lines just within that particular organization, potentially. And then there's every other organization that's looking to that. In other sectors, we've got micropayments now, a thing with Drop. There are going to be many more micropayments type use cases. We've got consumer engagement focused on rewards and micropayments, are a scale product. We've got sustainability and Guardian. So all of the IoT capturing of data that feeds into the policies that are then tokenized are all transactions on the network. So as all of these different fronts, and as I mentioned earlier, with these 3 big thematic areas, they're all driven by first HCS, so big scale transactions on the network, followed by tokenization. And sometimes those 2 things are linked, or sometimes it's different use cases within the same organization once they've become familiar with the use of Hedera. And all the other infrastructure is in place, like wallet infrastructure and on-ramps, off-ramps, etc., custody. So with all those things in place, that network effect is formed because a big organization or a small organization has the paraphernalia for it to reuse in different use cases. And so then we kind of start bringing all of the other use cases on top. So I suspect that over time, that will become a parabolic curve for usage until we have to shard and decentralize further, or go to privacy layers potentially, or private layers of Hedera. But this is all in the grand plan. This is all kind of part of Lehman's scheme to be a 100-year network, and we're still very early.
Well, let's get that flywheel going. All right, so you're almost there, Rob. We only have 2 left. HBAR Hub says other blockchain contributors say it's very important to have many validators, hundreds or thousands, even for one shard. Is it not necessary with Hedera since transaction order is the median of everyone's virtual vote, not set by one miner or block producer? Or is it just trust in the governing council? Now, I'm really actually interested in this answer, Rob. What are your thoughts?
Well, trust is the key word here. So people tend to forget, certainly the crypto Twitter X pundits, the crypto X doesn't have the same ring to it, but it's they forget that decentralization is fundamentally about trust. So we decentralized in Web3 because of the erosion of trust in the centralized authorities that were capturing our data, or telling us what to do, or determining how we could transact online. So it's all about trust. Our first phase on Hedera of decentralization has established an organization in the governing council that we don't have to trust, but should trust more than any other. And it's by design. Those organizations would not collude against the network. They would not form some kind of bad actor group to take over the network, because by design they are too big, really. The reputational risk is too high. They're cross-sector, they're cross geography, they're cross time, etc., etc. So all the things we know. So that's the first phase. Now, it is true that trust is formed in a proof of stake network, and the security of a proof of stake network is based on staking. It's based on our ability to distribute the tokens widely enough at a high enough value that no bad actor or state-backed bad actor can accumulate sufficient tokens to take over the network. And we're taking a very grown-up approach to decentralization, because over time one should actually decentralize the nodes through the community nodes, and then ultimately potentially to full decentralization. So that's the path we're on. That's the path we've been set on and have been following for years now. And it's all kind of evolving to plan. Clearly, we course correct occasionally because there are external influences and macro events that cause us to either reprioritize or slow down or speed up. But that's the path that we're on. But it's all about trust. Should we have thousands of nodes right now? No, because we're not at that stage in our evolution. Do we need to trust the governing council? Well, it's up to everyone who uses the network, whether or not that network is trustworthy or not. I would suggest that, we were talking about a particular layer 2 earlier. If you can't tell who is hosting the nodes on the network you're using, and there is a sense that it's becoming centralized, or that the governance of that network can make decisions which are not truly decentralized or transparent or open, then you should not have any trust in that network, that layer 2 or that centralized layer 1. And it's not about whether or not you trust the members of the governing council individually. It's whether or not that organization is trustworthy at this stage in its evolution. And I would say that there are no other networks that one could say that about. We say often, the granddaddy of them all, Bitcoin, is trustworthy because it has this open source, decentralized approach. That may be the case, right? But change is still managed by a shady cabal of coders, and there's increased centralization of the mining pools. The same is happening post proof of stake on Ethereum for the centralization of the validator pools. One should never trust, one should verify. And so the verification, it includes, personal verification is who hosts the nodes and can one trust those nodes or node pools. And I would say that because with Hedera you can identify all the nodes, you can see who's on the governing council, you can read the minutes that are published. That's as good as it gets.
No, I completely agree. And I think we are on that road to decentralization. I think at some point we will have thousands of nodes, but it will be when we need that amount of shards. There's going to be a balance between performance that the governing council has to manage, between performance and decentralization. And they're always going to try to do their best to maintain that balance.
This is hard, right? I mean, it's really hard to do, right? This is the future of the internet, the decentralized web, with which we will have, we and our children and our grandchildren will transact in ways that we haven't dreamed of for decades or 100 years. So it's worth getting right. And if you get it wrong, there's no coming back once it's compromised. So we do it properly. We do it under the right methodologies with control and governance, and at a pace which befits a grown-up approach to these things.
Well, I don't know how many times I've been concerned about certain things around the network, the time to consensus, time to finality, things like that. And they've always been able to address it in a methodical way, as you say. So I think that, they have what's in place to make sure that this network is successful. All right, last one here, Rob. Stoic Barbarian says, there seems to be a lull in governing council members joining the network. Who is responsible for onboarding new members, and why are they not calling Elon Musk every day?
Elon's pretty busy, but I'm not suggesting he's not being called every day. He's certainly called out on X every day by the community, so I'm sure we're on his radar. The membership committee is a subcommittee of the governing council. It is charged with the onboarding of new governing council members. It has been said many times that actually we get diminishing returns with with increasing numbers on the governing council. Clearly, we have another nine seats to fill. We have a few gaps in terms of industries. And I think those industries are maybe a little bit more risk averse or less likely to join in Web3. We mentioned oil and gas earlier, right? So maybe there are some sectors which are slower adopters of Web3 and therefore will come a bit later. And so seats will be held for those sectors. I am aware that there is a strong pipeline of potential governing council new members. The foundation and the association and other parts of the community, we've already said, even the community kind of present the new members into the membership committee. And there is a process. I think we talked about it last week. There is a process through which they go, and they've got to meet the criteria, and the criteria in the bar is kind of increasing as we go as well, because those seats are and will become increasingly valuable or sought after. That's the case. There's also a 3-year cycle, as we know. And at some point in the next, I don't know exactly when it is, there'll be a kind of re-election of members that by constitution have the rest of the governing council votes for those that have participated or contributed or have been active to stay for a further 3 years. So that will be an interesting cycle to see as well. But yes, it's healthy. It's really healthy. Just because there's kind of long periods between. I mean, the last one was Kofra, I believe, and that wasn't too long ago. So the early days, we were desperate for every new governing council member. But I think even as Mance said, maybe over a year ago, this will slow down because it'll just get into this pace that Hedera is in, because it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Well, I think one of the things is early on, there was just a lot of promise with Hedera, but there wasn't a lot to dig your teeth into. There wasn't a lot built yet as far as infrastructure and everything else. So we were really focused on those council members, where now we get to shift our focus onto some of the things that are actually being built, what Drop is doing, what Hyundai is doing, what Atma.io is doing. So there's a different focus at this point.
Yeah, and there's too much to focus on. I mean, you do just such an amazing job, although, I have to set aside 2 hours to watch everything back. Actually, I don't, because I don't watch my own stuff back, but, maybe an hour. And it's increasing, right? Every week on week, and you can just tell by the HBAR bull metric of the number of minutes that you have to dedicate each week. Maybe that's something that we should track as well, the number of HBAR bull minutes.
Maybe. I'm going to try to do a little bit better job at pinching some of that down. But Rob, you had a lot to go through today. Thank you so much for being a good sport, and we'll see you next week.
My pleasure. Thank you very much, Brandon, and see you next week.
All right, so the next thing I want to get into is what Tymlez is doing. So we know that Google Cloud is moving hard into the space, and what they want to do first is provide the infrastructure for the Web3 space. And Tymlez, one of our builders in the Guardian ecosystem, is taking advantage of that. So it's nice to see these different participants in our space working together and putting out the best product they can. Next up, we have Dovu, and I wasn't sure when this first came out if it was real, because we have all kinds of scams in the space, but this is absolutely real. Dovu are shifting their Dove tokens. So if you hold Dove tokens in a Hedera wallet, associate 0.0.3716059 by the 11th of this month to make sure that you get the airdrop of their new tokens. And sticking with the environmental space, the Sustainable Impact Fund had a great showing at the Africa Climate Week. So it's great to see our representatives making their mark. All right, a little bit of a hard left turn here. We have Karate Combat up next. Of course, they're going to have a huge event that I'm going to be down at in the Dominican Republic next week. But make sure anybody who has an Android device who hasn't been able to participate up until this point, make sure you get the Karate Combat Up Only gaming app and participate in that event next week. All right, this next one is absolutely huge. It comes out of Emtech. And of course, Emtech is providing CBDC solutions for central banks. They're starting with smaller central banks, but I think that's going to expand. So right now they're focusing on Africa and the Caribbean. They just onboarded a new one in Liberia. I know a lot of other networks focus on breadcrumbs, but this is real stuff. So any of these central banks that decide that they are going to leverage Emtech are going to use Hedera, because Hedera is built into Emtech's tech stack. Next up, we have BCW, and BCW is doing all kinds of fantastic stuff in the space. They are responsible for Hashport. They're responsible for Archaea, and we're going to be talking to Archaea and some of the participants in our space next week in a Twitter space. But the latest thing they've done is take over Hashgraph.name. Now, they have plenty of resources, so I think we're going to see some exciting stuff here. Some people have been upset with their new pricing model. They are giving you an opportunity that if you want to book some of the domains that you've gotten to this point, you can lock those in for 10 years. I think for the most part, this has frustrated people that have speculated on really good names. Now, I don't have a whole lot of sympathy because I tried to get Twidgedal.HBAR and I couldn't get it because somebody speculated that we were going to want to use that and jumped all over it. Now, we have Twidgedal.com, so I think we should be in good shape there. But I think their pricing model is trying to open things up a bit for some of the businesses that might want to use these domains. And it is in line with what the rest of the industry has. So the last thing I want to cover before we get into network analysis is Meterium. So Meterium is like an offshoot of Toko. And of course, Toko is focused on tokenizing assets, mainly on securities in a compliant way. But Meterium is like a subsidiary of a subsidiary. So Toko is a subsidiary of DLA Piper, one of the largest law firms in the world and one of the governing council members for Hedera. And Meterium is kind of like a subsidiary of Toko. Now, I could certainly see some collaboration with Twidgedal on this, but they did a really good gossip about gossip with Zenobia, and he kind of explains it. So let's listen to some highlights.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and also about Meterium.
Sure, absolutely. Let me start with Meterium. So our journey really began with Toko, which, as you'll know, I'm sure is DLA Piper's enterprise-grade tokenization engine. So Toko was really primarily aimed and still is aimed at financial services and regulated activities. But, as we were speaking with clients and potential clients, we realized that there was a real untapped opportunity at the retail level as well. So obviously corporate adoption of Web3, it's still really in its infancy. At least part of the reason for this is down to concerns about bad actors and the lack of solutions that really take a kind of a compliance first approach. So yeah, it was really to address this that we created Meterium, which is a white label token-based marketplace solution. And it empowers brands to own and operate their own marketplaces where they can issue tokens that represent specifically physical products, experiences, and also collectibles. And they can issue those directly to consumers. And then it also allows those consumers to buy, sell, and trade with one another.
And Lawton, tell us a little bit. You've already talked about some of the, exciting things and projects that you are having conversations with. Tell us a little bit about the roadmap and where you all see developing out the platform. You talked a little bit about wallets, but other things that you're starting to hear from customers that you plan to build in within the next, say, 12 months?
Yeah, let me do that. So, as I mentioned, wallet integrations and like I mentioned, some education-related features helping people onboard into Web3. Like I said, I think I said we're also looking to expand the ecosystem. So we're getting more directly involved into ticketing. So like I mentioned, those experience tokens, we're seeing really a lot of interest on that side particularly. So we're looking to continue to build that out and improve those user journeys. We're also talking to a number of large clients around loyalty and loyalty programs. So we're looking to develop out that piece of the ecosystem as well. And then more kind of on the business side, I think in the coming months, so let's say the next 2 to 3 months, I think that you can expect to see multiple Meterium-powered brand marketplaces and strategic partnerships popping up. We're really excited about those. I guess the only other thing to mention is we're looking to expand our distribution network and enhance our ability to engage with corporates. So yeah, I think those are the main items that we're looking to tackle over the next, let's say, 3 to 12 months.
I'm really excited to hear what Meterium has coming out. And the team from Meterium, I'm probably going to try to get in touch with you for Twigital. But if you see this and you want to get in touch with what we're doing with tokenizing physical objects, please get in touch. All right, with that, let's get into some network analysis. All right, so we're holding steady, averaging about 1.5 thousand transactions per second, which gives us about 131 million transactions over the past 24 hours, and a max TPS of 7,700. And all this while maintaining a 3.8 second time to finality. Hedera network account creation is still looking really good, probably helped out by the Android launch for Karate Combat. Moving down to our fungible tokens, unsurprisingly considering their airdrop, Karate Combat is in the top spot. We have both versions of Dovu as well as a couple versions of wrapped HBAR in the top 10. Again, that's not a big surprise. Also, some of the most transacted HTS tokens include Sauce, Heli, Energy Trade Token, USDC, and Lil Token. Looking at the non-fungible tokens, the most owned NFT, the Hashpack Backpack, is in the top spot, and they also have the Hashpack Special Themes in at number 9. Roadcode Access is holding in there at number 2. Now that's one to keep an eye on. Roadcode is leveraging Web3, but isn't a crypto-centric business, and the fact that we see them every week as one of the most transacted NFTs says a lot. The Pepe NFT is hanging in there in the 3rd spot, and there are 3 Karate Combat-themed Karateka NFTs on the list, and the top 10 is rounded out by CyberSafe NFT, Hashgraph Naming Service, and Hangry Barboons. So I'm sure next week Zep is going to have some more commentary on the NFTs, but with that, let's get into some DeFi. Taking a look at DeFi Llama, not including state or liquid staking, the total value locked in the Hedera DeFi ecosystem is just over $30 million. The vast majority of that is on Saucer Swap with $26.4 million and $3.77 million on HeliSwap. Moving over to the farming rewards on some of Saucer Swap's popular trading pairs, we have 6.7% on HBAR, HBAR X, 27% on HBAR Sauce, 30% on HBAR USDC, and 33% on HBAR Karate. On HeliSwap, you'll see 5.3% on HBAR, HBAR X, 82% on HBAR and their native token Heli, 30% on HBAR USDC, and 28% on HBAR Karate. There's really not much to pass on for the HBAR and crypto markets, with both HBAR and Bitcoin pretty much flat on the week. At the time of recording, HBAR is sitting at just under 5 cents and has been trading in a tight range between 4.8 and 5 cents pretty much all week. Hopefully, it'll break out to the upside for the next episode. So with those technical issues I was talking about earlier, this episode really almost did not happen. But with all the great insights from Zep and Rob and George and, of course, Basil, I just had to get it out. So next week, again, we're going to have a Twitter space on Tuesday morning Eastern with Archaea. So that's certainly not one to miss. I think we're going to get Hashpack, Earthlings, and Hashport on there as well. I'm going to catch up with Dane from Karate Combat. He's going to give us a rundown on the entire fight card because, of course, there's going to be the up-only gaming. We have to understand the odds. Now, I'm not suggesting anybody go out and do this, but if you are planning on adding any karate to your stack to participate in Karate Combat 41, you want to do it this weekend or early next week because there's going to be a snapshot taken of everybody's wallets in the Karate Combat app. And if you don't have your tokens in the Karate Combat app at the time, you won't be able to participate in that event. Beside that, I think that Rob is going to have some really exciting stuff to share, so I'm not sure if we're going to be able to get to any questions next week, but still drop them down below, and we'll catch them next time. That's all we have. We'll see you next week.